Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lion's Den and welcome to another edition in our Blue Collar Ballers series. Today we speak with Clint Iams, who's the CEO of Log Cabin Fence. This is an interesting conversation because Clint is actually a second generation owner of the company. His parents founded the company. And over time, as Clint worked his way up within the entity, he ended up taking over the business. So we talk a lot about succession planning, what it's like to work with your family, which personally for me is very interesting. And then on top of that, we go into, what they actually do at Log Cabin Fence, some of the interesting ways that they've been able to add some additional products and services to their suite, such that in, market downtimes for residential fencing, they have a way to stem the tide and still be profitable in those downswings. And so there's some really good lessons that he shares there, some really good lessons when it comes to leadership, recruiting, how to manage, a blue collar workforce within the fence installation industry, how to find them, how to train them. So this is a really cool conversation that I think you guys are going to like. Check it out. So Clint, you are a second generation business owner, but
Correct.
before that, you were a second generation employee at your parents' company. And I think a lot of our listeners and a lot of other construction trades businesses, they're in that same sort of setup. So what is it like working for your parents?
It is something I'm very grateful for, very thankful that I had the opportunity. So my parents started Log Cabin Fence whenever I was very small. I was born in 1980. The business started in 1981. So I grew up with being around the business. It was not unusual as we were on our way to go to some event for my dad to need to stop in and take a look at a job or something like that. So I grew up around it, but I always knew I would want to come back to it. But I got a college degree in accounting. I did audit work out of college. And then I came back 19 years ago or so to the business. But I'm very thankful for my time working with my parents at Log Cabin Fence, helping to make it bigger and better.
Did they have you doing odd jobs when you were like 12 years old, 14 years old in high school or anything like that?
Oh, no, absolutely. So in addition to our business, we also live on a farm. My kids are the 8th generation to live on our family farm.
Wow.
So it was very customary for us to be doing stuff with the fence crews or something on the farm. You might be 12 or 13 and a customer would come to buy some fence post and you'd go out to help them load it up. The business was on the farm until 2004. In 2004, we built our current facility, which is about 3 miles from the family farm. But no, it was very customary to be part of the crew growing up.
That's awesome. Yeah, I went to college with a bunch of people who had they were in their 3rd, 4th, 5th generation family businesses. And it was always really interesting to me. I studied family business a little bit during my MBA. And, my business is actually a family business as well. I started it with my siblings and my wife is now part of it. I've got a cousin who's a part of it. We're slowly, getting more and more family involved. When I tell that to people, a lot of times they react like, "Ooh, you should never go into business with your family." And I guess I've heard some of those horror stories, but like in your experience, what are the things that you do have to be careful of when you're working with your family?
Absolutely. So I'm very fortunate. We have a very good family working relationship. So at one point it was my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother-in-law, and one uncle all here in the business. So we were very used to being family work together. You have to be very diligent to try to not talk shop at Sunday dinner because inevitably it's Sunday and you need that day to relax and that day to not focus in on work. But inevitably the conversation would always steer to, hey, what's this person doing on Monday? What jobs do we have coming? And I think you have to be really diligent not to talk shop all the time because it's easy to fall back into that. And it does make Sunday dinners a little difficult sometimes because I saw everybody all week. I wanted to kind of do something different on Sunday. So I kind of had to be cognizant of that. And when you have kids, especially, I have kids. And so then you're like, hey, let's go see Nana and Pap this weekend. And it's like, I saw them all week. You were in school. I saw them. We don't need to go visit them. But you do need to be cognizant of that and just make it a point to talk about things other than work sometimes too.
Yeah, no doubt. What about from the perspective of within the business. I mean, something that's worked really well for me working with my family members is if everybody has sort of like their own little silo or dominion or just area of focus or something like that they can really own, it makes it a lot more collaborative, as opposed to if like someone in the family is in charge of other people in the family. And then it's like you've got the org chart says you're my boss, but our family tree says no one is anyone's boss because we're all just related. Did you ever encounter issues like that, or did you ever have different ideas about like which direction the business should go in from your family?
Sure. So, that's such a great question, because that is something that can make that Sunday dinner a little difficult whenever you were going to toes over something that maybe was a disagreement on Friday, right? My parents set it up pretty nicely. We each had our silos, and that was helpful. What I was doing with our fence and our structures was different than my brother-in-law in charge of equipment or my uncle in charge of post drivers. So keeping the things a little bit separate definitely did help. What I largely did is what my dad did, 20 years ago. I was out doing estimates for the fence installation, for our structure installation, scheduling the crews. There were definitely times where I would do something and my dad would be like, why'd you do it this way? You should have done it this way. And I would have to kind of prove why I was doing it a different way. Fortunately, my dad and I have a wonderful working relationship. There's a lot of people I don't think are as fortunate as we were. We worked really well together, but I definitely had to earn that respect. I had to prove that focusing in on the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden as a customer was somebody that was worthwhile to do, because they required more attention because it was a different customer than our norm. So I think at times he would say, well, why are you focused on that? And I was like, I think we got something here. And then it would pan out nicely. Not that I'm perfect. I mean, I made mistakes too. But I think when it's that parent-child relationship, you kind of have to prove yourself a little bit, that you kind of know, hey, no, there's a reason why I went to that college. And there's a reason I work somewhere else to build this skill set and be able to bring it back and do it here.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I guess for you personally, you did prove yourself because you now hold the reins, right? Your parents, I'm guessing, have retired. So
Correct.
did you guys already have like a succession plan in place, or was this like many companies, they get to the end and it's like, oh crap, we should have been planning this before, and then it's chaos?
There were conversations. We definitely, in retrospect, we definitely could have done things better, a little bit more different. We made it through it all, but it's easy to know that you need to do something better, but it's really hard to do. It really is. And I've had this conversation with many other people that I've gone to school with, or I'm in networking groups with, or that are also second or third generation owners, and their own stumbling blocks, because there's so many variables in the equation. We had a situation here where, I had a sibling and a brother-in-law involved in the business. But what I was doing in the business was the largest part of the business. So how do you make that a nice, even, easy transition? A good friend of mine who I went to undergrad with, he's a third generation business owner. He has multiple siblings that weren't even involved with the business. But when it was time to consider that succession planning, they were kind of wondering where their piece of the pie was. So it is definitely something you have to be very diligent about, and you have to put thought into how you're going to do it. I think the sooner you think about it, the better off you're going to be. Another example I can think of, I talked to a gentleman who's also in the fence industry. This was 8-9 years ago, and he was asking what we were doing, because he was slightly ahead of where we were. And the issue that he was running is he's like, hey, I've been here for 30 years. I've really helped to build it, but now they want me to make this really big check to help buy. But, I kind of thought all those times I didn't really get a pay increase was why I was here, and it would just come over. So it's definitely something that you need to, I think the word go, you can't ever not be thinking about what it is, at least loosely in the background. What are we going to do in 5, 10, 15 years when that comes down the line?
Yeah, no, that's really smart. So what about your parents? Are they still involved at all? Or do they like sit on the board? Are they advisors, or they're living their best life in retirement? What's going on?
They're both enjoying retirement. What's really funny, I mean, they still live very close. They are not the type that are going to Florida for the winter. With having the farm, my dad's happiest when he's on the farm making hay and doing things like that. So what's really nice is I have the option to, when I do have that unique random question, I can send over a text or say, hey, stop in when you drive by. I want to bounce this idea off of you. But they're both really enjoying having more time to do the things that they enjoy as opposed to being down here every day.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's shift to maybe like a little bit of like leadership and team culture stuff. You're in charge now, right? You're the boss. And when you came into that role, was it difficult to take over leadership of the company, or was everybody kind of quick to just understand like, oh yeah, of course Clint's in charge now?
I think it was a fairly easy transition. But with that being said, I definitely was very conscientious of how I approached many decisions going into it. I didn't at all want it to feel like, there's a new boss in town or anything like that, or that was anything really significant. There were definitely things that I've changed on how we do things, but I was very diligent to consider the culture and consider everyone, how they're going to perceive it, as opposed to just simply do it. I mean, obviously I could have come in and said, doesn't matter what you think, this is what I'm doing. But one of my key things that I really focus on here is I want a collaborative culture. And that starts with how I approach things. There's a lot of things I'm really good at. There's a lot of things I'm not good at. There's areas that I have blind spots in. So I want somebody that has a stronger idea about the hydraulics of our post drivers. I don't want them to be fearful to come in and talk to me because they think I'm going to just shoot it down because, they just started here 4 months ago. I hired that person because they know a lot about hydraulics, right? So yeah. I was very conscientious about how I did things. In our transition, it went really well. I'm very thankful for it.
Nice. So you mentioned, people who know a lot about hydraulics as an example. You obviously have a business. You're in the trades, fence installation. That workforce is in high demand and in low supply for the most part. How do you
of the podcast?
Yeah, exactly. How do you deal with that? Do you have like certain retention strategies, recruiting strategies? Like, how are you dealing with that issue?
It's a great question. And it's such a topic we need to discuss right now because it's a major issue. So one of my considerations when I was considering, do I buy the business out from my parents or not? It was kind of running that SWOT analysis. What is good about it? What's my strength? What's my weakness? What's the opportunity? What's the threat? The biggest threat to anything in the trades is the people out there to actually swing the hammer. We have the infrastructure. We have the website. We have the SEO. I have the knowledge on our products. I can go out and talk ad nauseum about fence or structures or our post drives or our equipment. But if I don't have the people to actually do the work, we're not going to make any money. So my goal with purchasing the business was I want Log Cabin Fence to be a sort of trade mecca where people want to be employed by. So there are things that we are doing with that to be very attractive to that very small labor pool out there of people that are very conscientious, people that want to go out and make neat things, cool things, and get paid a fair wage for it. So we do things like 4 10-hour days for 3-day weekends. So a lot of our staff is on a 4-10 schedule. A lot of our stuff that's outside, you say here in south of Pittsburgh, it's super dreary and rainy and nasty. They're not working today, but what they'll do is they will work tomorrow and they'll still get their 40 hours in for the week. My crews love that because for the most part, they get 3-day weekends. And who doesn't want a 3-day weekend? We do full insurance for employees. We're adding on AFLAC as an optional one where I'm going to cover some of the costs on that. Last week, I brought in some financial advisors to do a financial literacy, just a basics, because there's a lot of things that people don't realize how important it is to have the savings, what to do, how to increase your credit score. So I'm trying to constantly just add those kind of perks for our staff. So that way we're a desirable place to come and work.
Yeah, no, I love that. One of the things we've done for a few of our clients that's worked really well is when there is that sort of, blue collar sort of labor pool, we try to put in place a very clear career growth path. And so it's like, if you fulfill this training and you're able to do these additional things, then you get this raise, this promotion, and just make it really, really clear to them. And ultimately the things they're training in are things that we can then bill their customers even more for, right? So it's like higher end stuff, higher quality stuff. And so it all makes sense for the business. You pay them more because they're earning you more. And that's worked really well for retention, because even when people get stressed out, they're like, ooh, but I am just 6 modules away from finishing that next training thing. And then I'll get that promotion. Okay, I'll stick it out, even though I'm a little frustrated in the high season right now,
Sure.
What about, if we talk about like higher end stuff, right? Like what are your product offerings? Have you introduced higher end stuff? I mean, sometimes in fencing, specifically fence installation, it's sort of a race to the bottom in terms of like trying to price underneath your competitors to win jobs.
Sure.
How do you combat that?
We are very unique. So one of the things with me buying and taking over, one of my goals is I want to make us bigger. I want to raise the number of crews that I have out in the field. But we have this really nice little niche where we're solving unique problems with unique solutions. And that comes at a premium. Anybody can walk off the shelf and buy something that's a cookie cutter picket panel fence at Lowe's or Home Depot. But when you have significant elevation grade, or you have something unusual you're trying to do with your fence, well, that's where you need a true expert to come in and take care of it. We've done a really good job we have a really beautiful website that showcases a lot of our work. Really, I've leaned in on our socials through Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and sharing a lot of the things that we do. And it's kind of becoming a self-fulfilling thing for us. Like when I show off the fact that we are testing post for an elephant fence for the Pittsburgh Zoo, that's pretty cool. And it gets people realizing that we're not just going out and doing the same, simple chain link to keep the dogs in. We can do some things like that, but it by showcasing the things that we're doing, it's definitely helped us for our customers and potential customers to see that we can do next level stuff.
You created a fence that keeps the elephants in?
So we did some work for the Pittsburgh Zoo back in the fall, fixing a bison fence for them. They have a facility about an hour and a half east of Pittsburgh. It's like an acclimation facility where they'll bring animals in that maybe never been in fence before, get them used to that before they're in the zoo where it's much closer. So after we fixed the bison fence that had a few issues, they asked us what we knew about elephant fence. And I was like, well, yeah, never built an elephant fence, but let's take a look at what you got. And so what we did between Christmas and New Year, and this was fun because I was able to bring my dad out of retirement for this one. We went up and drove a couple posts or installed a few posts. They're going to put enticers on the post the elephants will play with. And they're going to see, is that post strong enough? Does it bend over? Does it break? Does it move through the ground? They have a design currently, but it's big I-beams and a lot of concrete and very expensive and very tedious to build. So if we can use our post driver, which we're very good at using, which we do all the time, and find something we can drive into the ground, eliminating the concrete, quicker, cheaper, easier, they can much more affordably build 3,000 feet of that fence. So yeah, so it's leaning on our skill sets of we're good at putting strong things in the ground and making sure they stay. Is it elephant strong? We're going to find out. So that's why we did a couple different ways of it to put a test up there and see which one is strong enough to really work.
That's fascinating. And I love the way you think about, your company. It's not, hey, let's crank out a bunch of residential fences. It's here's what we're really good at. Like, yeah, we can do residential fences. We can do commercial fences. We can do specialty fences. Bottom line is we're really good at putting really strong stuff in the ground. And that sort of like ethos in a way can kind of like open you up to new projects and new customer segments and all sorts of things. What's another cool custom project that you guys have done?
Oh, we have a number of them we've done over the years. In the last, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years, when Pinterest really took off, instantly everybody saw all of these neat, like, oh, I want a fence to look like this. And so quite frequently we'll take that image, and oftentimes it's something, fence is very geographical specific, right? So what we do in Pennsylvania is going to be different than what they do in Florida or Washington State or something like that. So they might see a picture of some material that really wouldn't work well in our area, would just would fall apart too easily, or can't handle our elevation change. But I do have other options that can work like that. So we did a really neat project at a resort close to Wheeling, West Virginia, to keep the deer out of the garden, because they had a farm to table restaurant. They had this really beautiful garden that was on this terraced hill. And we went around and built anti-deer fence all around it. On the lower side, we did a very simple standard woven wire that just blended right in. But on the upper area, we sort of built like picture frames in between each of the posts and capped off the wire and put trim and stuff on it, which really gave it a quite a beautiful look because of all the angles with the picture frames of this mesh woven wire. So that's a fun one that we did. We had a home recently, well, not recently, it was a year and a half, 2 years ago. This home was built before the Revolutionary War, and they wanted a picket fence that didn't look like, just the common picket fence you see on the market today. So we took our 1x6, 16-foot poplar boards that we use all the time for board fence or for privacy fence, and custom cut 3-inch wide pickets that had kind of a nice little spear top, pointed top to them. The wood is a full 1-inch thick, so it's very hardy. Most of today's lumber that's on the marketplace for a privacy fence or a picket, it's, 1/2 inch thick, 3/4 inch thick. But that full 1-inch thick just gave it that look, like something that would have been made 200 plus years ago. So that was another fun one too, because the home was just a gorgeous stone home, pre-Revolutionary War. Just seeing how things were built then to try to complement that, not take away from that.
Yeah, that's awesome. You also mentioned structures. When you're saying structures, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so in the mid 90s, we added into our portfolio fabric structures. So it is a steel framework with a high density polyethylene cover. We were one of the very first companies in the United States to install these. At that point, they were fairly common in Canada, but we were buying them out of Canada, bringing them in. We were installing them as well as selling them to other dealers to install. So we were so early in that, we got to watch that entire industry grow. So back in the mid 90s, this would be a single piece of pipe with a piece of high density polyethylene cover stretched over it that would last 7 to 9 years. It would be 30 feet wide, no bigger. You could go long with it, but that was kind of your limit. Now the industry is making 250-foot wide structures, hot dip galvanized framework, fully engineered fabric that's going to last 25, 30, 35 years. So it's a very neat part of our business. We have several businesses here at Log Cabin Fence that all blend together very nicely for the ag community. We build a lot of farm fence. Those structures work really nice for hay storage, equipment storage, animal housing.
Okay.
We handle farm equipment, Vermeer equipment, and woods equipment. So we're very tied into the agricultural community of southwestern Pennsylvania, and that structure is a big part of it. The structures are a big part of our business.
Interesting. No, I think for a lot of our listeners, that is, one of the things you're always looking for when you're trying to scale your fence company, HVAC company, roofing company, whatever it is, if you can look outside the box and bring in some additional thing. And in your case, you brought in this additional product offering that also serves the same sort of customer that you're already serving. So you can sell them this, right, the farm clients. So you can sell them this additional thing. Then you can sell people just on the structure and then upsell them on the fence later. And so it allows you like more openings to get into the ideal client that you want, which is genius.
We have many customers that are having us install fence, buying fence post off of us. We've built a building or 2 or 3 for them. They've bought their round baler for us, or their mower from us, or they bought a woods tiller from us. So it really, that synergy that is created. The other thing that will happen is somebody will come here to buy fence post, and then they will see the structures and be like, "Oh, that's really interesting. I need a new building." So you can show off all the features. They definitely work very well together, and I think diversification is just such a key part of your business, because one of the things that helps us, if you do have a year where something's maybe down a little bit, or if something changes that you didn't see coming down the pike, well, you're not having all your eggs in one basket. You have multiple things you're offering, and oftentimes if one dips, another one's lifting, so it helps carry the whole thing as you go.
No doubt. And those structures, I just pulled up your website. I was looking at them. I mean, they are, like you said, some of them are huge. I mean, what does a project like that go for? Are we talking like 100 grand, 50 grand? What are we talking about?
We've had
Revenue
some
wise?
that are up in, over 100 grand, but our bread and butter, our normal project for us is something 30, 40, or 50 foot wide, 50 to 100 foot long. It's a 1 to 3 day project. We're going to go in
Okay.
and put 6x6s in the ground as the foundation. We do have a number of different options like concrete or shipping containers as well, but most of the time we're putting 6x6 in the ground. It all started with my dad saw it at a trade show, and at that time they were built on fence posts, and he was like, I know how to put fence posts in the ground, and I need some more hay storage. That's a really nice building, and that's how it kind of grew from there. So we're good at putting posts in the ground. We would put the 6x6 in, build the framework on top of it. So most of the time it is a 25 to 50K project. But with that being said, we've done some projects that are much larger, 70, 80 feet wide, fully enclosed sheet metal end walls, garage doors, things like that, where you can get 100 to 150K pretty easily when you start adding all the bells and whistles and such.
Yeah. That's crazy. Okay. So on the sales side of things, have you segregated your sales team? So it's like this person's selling fence, this person is selling structures, or is it like customer base? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so we keep the fence and structures fairly close. One person can handle both of those. Um, Whenever we're talking our other parts of our equipment, the woods and the Vermeer or the post drivers, we will kind of silo those ones off. Now,
Hmm.
one of the perk of us all being here and have been around it for so long, everyone's pretty knowledgeable on everything. So
Mhm.
on the Vermeer or the woods, I am not in it very much at all. But if my brother-in-law Todd, if he is out doing a repair, or if he's on vacation and somebody pops in, I have enough basic knowledge I can help get through it until he can take over and really answer the question and clarify any of the mistakes that I made with it. Same goes for the fence and structures. Everyone is trained enough that they can get the initial questions answered, and then when you get into the nitty gritty, the person in charge of that silo takes over.
Got it. Okay. And then I know with some fence companies, they'll sort of segregate the sales team from the project management team, and then there has to be like a handoff from one to the other. Whereas other companies just have the sales guy runs it all the way through and manages the whole project. How do you guys navigate that?
At our size, we have the one person running it all the way through.
Okay.
The things that happen with just the little memory, we try to document everything, but inevitably something didn't get tossed into the CRM or on it. And if you have that one person who was the person actually talking to the customer,
Yeah.
that is saying to the foreman, hey, this is what we're doing, you usually don't lose anything in translation. Also, the customer, I think, appreciates having that one point of contact throughout the whole thing. And we get pretty good Google reviews for that kind of stuff too, because we really pay attention to the details on that and make every effort to make sure that it's just a really nice, easy communication the whole way down the line.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Let's talk growth for a second, real quick. So you mentioned earlier in the conversation, social media. You said you take these really cool pictures of projects you guys have completed. You put it out on social media. I've seen with certain industries, social media does not work at all. It's kind of a waste of money. But certainly in the trades, certainly fence installation, I've seen it work really, really well. So how have you guys attacked that? What sorts of results have you seen from social media? What's your recommendation, to other companies like yours?
Just as a quick kind of stepping back, one of the things that we do here at Log Cabin, we really don't do any advertising. And when I say we don't do any advertising, we don't do any advertising. Like, now, granted, my trucks have a wrap on them. We have our sign out front, but like for the most part, other than our website, we're not doing a whole lot of paid advertisement, Google or Facebook or anything like that. Where I take our funds for that is I really try to invest in our community. We do sponsor a day of the county fair. We sponsor local events and things like that. Um, that engagement with the community, I feel like we have a very good name in Southwestern PA. We do good work, but also they're seeing that we're supporting the things that our society kind of enjoys, the county fair, the Christmas parade and stuff like that. So when we do have our socials, we have I think we're at 1,500 or 1,600 followers on Facebook. For a company our size, that's pretty good. And we get a good bit of engagement on each of our posts. And I think it's because of those efforts we make to try to make the community better. Um, who doesn't want to live in a nicer area? So if you can kind of push back into those things and make it nicer, it makes it better for everybody involved. So I think that's how we get the responses we get on our social media posts. I also try to keep it really fresh when we're doing it. I'm kind of always paying attention to what I'm seeing. And if I see something that I think could be applicable, I'm going to turn that right into it. Obviously, nostalgia is great. Anytime you can throw out something that has a little bit of a kickback, um, it tends to work pretty well. But our primary three, or what we're using, is Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We did not have an Instagram or a LinkedIn a year and a half ago. We only had Facebook. But in late 23, early 24, we put both of those in the mix. And LinkedIn is how I got the elephant fence project and the bison fence project. And I know directly it was from that. A former coworker from back in my audit days is the CFO of the Pittsburgh Zoo. And I don't know that she would have thought to contact me because we worked together 20 years ago. But I started posting the things we're doing on LinkedIn, and that led to talking about bison fence, fixing that fence, and then led to testing elephant fence. And now I'm trying to design a hamster fence. So it leads to all the other things from putting those things out there. With the social media, I'm a big fan of, or I'm a big proponent of, just be authentic. It doesn't need to be super polished. You don't want to look unprofessional. You don't want to come out there looking like a slob, or you don't want to have a bunch of typos in the text that you're putting out. But the authenticity of being real and on a job site, throwing the camera up and showing people what's going on with like a live video, it tracks incredibly well. People enjoy that, especially anybody that's looking to have something done. They'll see that and realize, oh, that they really know. Look, that was just what they're doing right now, because it's live, and you don't get a second take at it. So I think a combination of those things has really been our little secret sauce that's worked well for us. Trying to be authentic, trying to give back to the community, name recognition. They recognize the name, they recognize the logo, and they're going to be more apt to come to us when it's time for their project.
It all makes total sense. Yeah. And I love the point you're making about, LinkedIn is sort of the best place for B2B sales, or at least getting those conversations going. So you were able to land some pretty big, exciting deals that way. That makes sense. Facebook, not so much for that, but obviously B2C, it works. And then honestly, I also love your point about, basically why give money to Facebook and Google when you can give it to the other companies in your community and just keep the money there and have your community continue to grow. Makes total sense. What about on the sales front? What about networking? Like, do you swear by that? Do you engage in that? It seems like you're in the community. So like, how do you approach networking?
Networking is something that is really tricky for sure. Prior to me owning the business, I didn't do as much with networking, but with last year, with me buying the business, the other thing that happened to us here, went into 24, and I think a lot of people in the trades will say the same thing. 24 was a bit of a recession. I don't feel like any of the pundits officially called it a recession, but it was really clear. So my background's accounting. I love numbers. And I was looking at our job size. I was looking at our calls coming in. Everything was low. Our jobs were smaller. We weren't doing many of as bigger jobs. We're doing a lot of smaller jobs. People in 2024 were really holding on to their money until late in the year. So what I did was lean heavier on the socials. I was making it a point to put more content out. And then I went to more networking events. I don't know that I really got a ton of direct sales from my networking events, but I definitely did pick up a few new suppliers for certain things, logistics companies, things like that, just people that I hadn't really explored before, kind of looked into it. With our commercial post drivers, we send them around the country. And I got a contact at one of the networking events, and we were paying almost half for the freight that we were paying previous. Now, that doesn't affect me directly because the customer's paying the freight, but helps me to sell that post driver if freight's only 900 instead of 1800. So what I did find from the networking was some really good contacts, some fun people that I see at the future events, and it's always fun to catch up. The downfall of the networking is the sales calls. You're inevitably going to get a number of people trying to push their service to you as well, and that can be a little tedious to handle. How many different times you get a a call or an email to come to that company for insurance or baking or things like that. But that's part of it as well. That's kind of how the whole thing goes. Overall, I don't know that it's I don't think networking is like the most crucial. You absolutely have to do it. There's definitely good that can be in it, but you can also really quickly spend so much time networking, you're not actually getting anything done.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I mean, it's not like every role at the business should be networking. That is a little bit more like the CEO's role, like to be
Sure.
externally facing and,
Yeah.
possibly bring in those larger deals that way. And as for 2024, we're totally on the same page. I mean, we've got a bunch of clients in the trades, electricians, plumbers, solar, HVAC, fencing, and all of their sales are down just across the board. I mean, interest rates were higher and nobody wanted to spend money. And I'm speaking more about the residential side of things.
Sure.
A lot of them were really leaning into their commercial sales to try to make up for that, which, going all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, that's why the diversification is so important. When one thing's down, you can lean on the other. It's just huge.
Absolutely. One of the things I did in late 23 was I brought on a financing company. We had never had financing as an option. Basically, if a customer wanted something but didn't have the money in the bank, we would say, well, go talk to your bank, come back when you're ready, type thing. So I did bring on financing. Personally, I literally didn't have a single person use it in 24, but it opens a conversation. So you might have somebody stick around a little bit longer because they have the ability to look at financing. It's built right into the website, and they can hop out there, see what rates they could get, decide if they would rather pull something from savings or go the financing route. I think it's good to offer it. 24 is a great example that the rates were higher, and I think that's why some people didn't use the financing. But when those rates drop down a little bit, I can see some customers using it.
Yeah, no doubt. Awesome. Well, is there any, I think we're kind of wrapping up here. Is there any advice that you wish you could give to yourself earlier in your career? If there is, what would that be?
Boy, I didn't consider that. I kind of jotted down some notes here to see some things. I didn't think of it here. We've been around a long time. We've been around since 1981. And as I mentioned, I'm very thankful for the working relationship I had with my parents whenever we were here. One of the things that we did initially, and my parents established this, and I do the same thing. So it's always been ingrained in me. So I don't think I had to go back and do it, but it's really simple. Let your yes be yes. Let your no be no. I constantly have people that will say, well, can you do it for $1,000 less? And my response is no, I didn't put an extra $1,000 in there just to take it off. If you didn't ask me for $1,000 then off, I would have made $1,000 more than I'm entitled to on this project. And I think if you just operate with that level of kind of transparency and clear, there are people that are going to want you to do something that is not structurally the right way to do it, or they want to use a cheap material. Don't change your methodologies or your systems to try to accommodate that customer. If you have a customer that if your standard terms are a third down to be on the schedule, the second third when you move in, and then the final payment at completion, and you have a customer that only wants to give you 10%, well, maybe that customer is not right for you. So I think the biggest thing is just lean on what you know how to do, and you have your policies in place. Run with them, because inevitably when you start to deviate, that's when you're going to have some kind of an issue. So yeah, I'd say that's probably the advice I'd offer there.
I agree. Yeah, nobody says you have to chase every possible dollar of revenue and 10x your business every year. I mean, it's usually a much more pleasant life if you control those crazy variables, like you're saying, stick within your boundaries, and maybe you grow a little bit slower top line wise, but you have a lot more sanity. You're probably more profitable, and ultimately your life is going to be more enjoyable, which is the end goal we should all have, right? So,
well, and I think some people too get so fixed on the sales number. And granted, I'd love more sales. Let's talk net income, because that's where it really matters, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you double your sales, but you end up losing money. So let's really talk at what you're actually keeping out of that, because that's really what matters. One of the things I noticed from 24 was our backlog was noticeably shorter than it usually would be. And in the past, there would be times we would push out 13, 14, 16 weeks. I didn't like being that deep, but it was also the money was coming in, the contracts were signed. How do you deviate from that, or how do you stop from that? When our backlog got thin, we had the opportunity to pull the trigger on some really cool projects that probably I would have lost in the past. So my margins went up, even though sales were down, my margins went up. And I got my foot in the door, some new customers and some really cool projects. So I think being aware of your numbers is so incredibly important. And there's a lot of people that are kind of just doing this. You really have to be aware of the numbers. You have to pay attention, and that's how you know how you're going to do well that quarter, that year.
Amen. Totally agree. Awesome. Well, Clint, thank you very much. We will, of course, link to logcabinfence.com. We'll, I'm sure on your website you have a link to your socials.
Yeah.
Yes, I see them right there. Awesome. And otherwise, thank you very much for joining me in the Lion's Den.
I appreciate the opportunity. It was a good conversation. I always like talking business, and thank you for your time.
Right back at you.